Welcome to Distinctly Well. I'm your host, Leo Tonkin. And in each episode, we engage in insightful and distinct conversations with a variety of experts, innovators, thought leaders, and friends, exploring what it truly means to live and be well in all facets of life. Let's explore, learn, and grow together. Welcome to Distinctly Well. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Leo Tonkin, and we're at another episode of Distinctly Well. And I have a guest who is joining me that we were just getting a little bit related to. This is Jennifer Oknin, who is in Atlanta and is a certified health and wellness coach. She has a big professional background that we were just sharing from my organizational leadership change management days. And she's been a career woman most of her life and somehow has shifted into wellness and really focuses on how to live well and more specifically, how women can live well. And while I'm not an expert in that arena, I am married to someone who, as we are aging and dealing with the things that she goes through, I sort of am living through it with osmosis to a degree, and have two sisters and a mother. So I am looking forward to getting some insight. And I know that there's been a lot happening in women's health, a lot more focus. I know that a lot of research for a lot of the medical studies over the years have been focused on mainly men when they start doing their research and everything. So now you're starting to see all kinds of things. So Jennifer, first of all, welcome to Distinctly Well. Great to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
No, appreciate it. So tell me what was it that got you from being that career woman that was doing all kinds of leadership roles in GE and all these companies, and now here you are all around wellness?
Well, really, I think like most people, it's personal experience, personal circumstance. As I started with GE pretty much right after I graduated from college. And, it was a fantastic experience, fantastic company, but I was really running the corporate ladder in those early days of, through the late 90s, early 2000, every 12 to 14 months, getting pulled into a different role, run, right, all the time. And that was fine. It was great. I loved it. But really what ended up happening is there was too much of a singular focus on career and not as much focus on really looking at the big picture of my life. What did Jen want to do? What was I interested in? What did I want to accomplish? Right. And, that led to, missed opportunities with friends, with family, just being so driven that eventually it really started to take a toll on my health. And it was funny. I had just taken a new role to lead a global organization in one of our gas turbine businesses. And I was getting my whole brand new team together in Florence, Italy, right? Great new boss, right? Everybody getting together for integration. And I was prepping for that trip, and I realized that none of my clothes fit, none of the clothes I wanted to take. And as a woman, probably as a guy, a little traumatic too, maybe. But for me, I was like, I'm packing for Europe for 3 weeks and I have nothing to wear. And it was a really transformative moment. And I couldn't really believe that I had let my physical health change to such a point that I didn't even notice. I mean, my eating habits were poor. My sleep habits were poor. I had no concept about stress management, even though, yes, I was highly stressed. And so, to this day, when I look back on pictures from that trip, which was an amazing trip, right? We accomplished so much and we saw things and it was just great bonding. But I look at those pictures and I cringe because I think, wow, that's what happens when you have a highly driven professional who really just focuses too much on their own career and not enough on all the other aspects of life that are in a way, much more important. And so that began my mindset shift into, wow, I've really got some things to do in terms of balancing priorities.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're starting to see a lot more conversations about work-life balance. And I know that through the pandemic and remote working and trying to balance everything is really what a lot of companies are struggling with now. And while you may have left the corporate world to pursue this, how do you maintain that today? Because I know that as a wellness coach, you probably have clients that are still in the corporate world, and it's not necessarily an either or conversation. How do you maintain that balance?
Yeah, I mean, most of my clients, except one, I have a brand new client that I just took on in Canada who just retired, which is my first time working with a retiree. But yeah, everybody else is still in the thick of the game. And that's deliberate because that's who I want to work with. You know, I was that person. And what I think is important to note is that balance isn't something that necessarily comes every day, right? It's just not like that. There are ebbs and flows to the seasons of our lives, and there's going to be, you know, run-ups when you're really busy, and there's going to be times when you're more relaxed. And I think that's a more realistic way of looking at things and trying to strive for balance. So what I talk to is really setting foundational habits, kind of doing an inventory. Where are we with those big boulders of, you know, of what are you eating? How are you moving? What's your sleep like? You know, are you resting adequately? What do those things look like? What are those habits? And then how can we set up much stronger foundations in those areas so that as we go through the ebbs and flows of life, of hormonal changes, you know, we have strong foundations to sustain us.
Right. Well, I think that's a big part of it. I know, as I mentioned earlier, I was involved with Stephen Covey with the 7 Habits program way back when, and right, you had your quadrants of what was important and what was urgent, and the old metaphor of do you put the big rocks in or the smaller rocks and the sand and the water, and those big rocks are the things that typically we put off until we have to focus on it, until it's kind of like the red light coming on in your car. Exactly. You know, everything is fine until something's wrong. Mm-hmm. So how do you make those foundational habits a habit? How do you now, here you have clients, they are working, they're in their certain pace, and now you want them to put a big rock in the middle of the water that they're putting all the fires out with. How do you get that to stick?
Well, most of them, if they actually end up enrolling in my program, they're ready to do that, right? They're ready to do the work. So that's an important thing, because I have told people that based on our consultation, you know what, you're just not ready. And I've actually turned some people away and said, you know what, go have some conversations with your spouse about this. Go figure these things out, and then let's come back and talk. These are things I would consider. So once I do have somebody who enrolls with me, well, the most important thing is really having that first deep conversation about where they are right now. And then you don't try and change everything all at once. That's impossible. It's overwhelming. Yeah. They're already stressed, right? I don't want to say, okay, we're going to go do all of these things. So then I start simply with certain things. We make certain changes. And I do believe in using, like most people, if they're overstressed, not enough sleep, not eating well, right? Their bodies are nutritionally depleted, which makes everything worse. So I start them out on some simple changes with their nutrition. I add in some key supplements that we need, that especially as a woman over 40, you know, it's obvious that we need. And then we talk about, so for example, fitness, right? We talk about that. Are you moving your body at all right now? Are you working out? If you're not, okay, let's just start with walking, right? Let's start with steps. So it's about meeting people where they are and giving them 1 to 2 things to focus on for the first, you know, few weeks, and then moving from there. Because you can't do it all at once. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I think that's there's so much effort being put on self-care nowadays, and people taking more responsibility for their health and well-being. And I think one of the tough things, and I think that's why, at least in the corporate world, when I was doing a lot of my leadership and coaching programs, you need somebody to help hold you accountable. It's very difficult doing it yourself.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about how that works, because I know for myself, as I'm aging, I'm now getting to that 60 plus age. I'm 63. And there's things that you got to be paying attention to that I didn't really have to pay attention to before.
Sure.
And I know that's true for my wife. And we're in our second marriage, so we're together now about 8 years. And when I met her and she still is in her menopause, her hot flashes, her things. And I, as a man, am trying to understand how she reacts and deals with a lot of things in her life. While I know men and women are different, are there certain nuances in your coaching and holding women accountable that may be distinct that we don't understand?
I don't know that they're distinct. I would answer it this way.
Yeah.
I deliberately set up my signature 90-day program to be a one-on-one program because the women that I work with, they're all, professional C-suite women or right on that cusp of C-suite. So number one, they don't have a lot of time. Number two, they need that quick one-on-one interaction so that we can make decisions together quickly, right? And then each week or every other week, when we do get together, it's okay, let's review where we were last week, where are we this week, what's happening. So it's more of that hot seat coaching and accountability instead of maybe teaching as necessary as certain topics come up, but accountability is huge. And I think having that special one-on-one time where they can get the answers they need, they can feel like somebody is hearing them, and they can have somebody in their corner who they trust, they can unburden themselves to, because in every other aspect of their lives, right, they're leaders, right? So people are looking to them. So they have to be strong.
Right.
They have to be more, they're obviously they're not, leadership is very different now than it was 20 years ago, but still.
Right.
Leading their teams. They need a place where they can be vulnerable and ask questions about hot flashes, ask questions about, why am I just so exhausted all the time? So I give them that safe space. And so the accountability is built in because of that trust, that environment that I set up for them.
Yeah. No, obviously it's key. You got to be straight with your coach, right? You got to really, tell it the way that it is. It's interesting, though. I find workplace wellness, that you're working with a lot of women that are in leadership positions. It seems like, and I don't know what you're noticing, but you would think some of the big corporations, and many of them are doing this, they're putting in wellness programs for their employees. What are you seeing is the gap between where they work and then doing this? And I don't know, maybe you are going inside of companies to help develop more programs for the leadership women that are in positions, because it really isn't necessarily something that should be outside of the work. Are you seeing more shift in the leadership roles and the people you're talking to getting more into the business sector?
I don't work on the corporate side. I work with people individually. So that's my focus. I considered that starting out, but that really wasn't where I wanted to be. And I think
hear you.
part of the reason for that is, again, I wanted to make wellness something that was a focus for these women, looking at the complete 360 vision of their life. When you have a corporate wellness program, which, hey, I think they're amazing, but again, it's so skewed to what is happening at work. Mm-hmm. And you're with the people at work. I want to get women out of that environment because they're in it too much.
Right.
They need a different perspective. They need a different environment. Right. Now, that being said, there's not as many corporate wellness programs out there as people think. I think there's a long way to go with them. I think that, especially in terms of women and perimenopause and menopause, we are so far behind that here in the U.S. I think in the UK, I've talked to a lot of coaches over there. There's, workplace menopause certification programs, in
Right.
the UK, and I've been guests on podcasts over there. They're about 10 years ahead of us here in the States in terms of what they're doing, and they're still behind. So there's definitely a long way to go.
Yeah. Interesting. What are you seeing as the top issues that the women leaders are facing? I mean, if you were ranking them, I know we have sleep, nutrition, stress, menopause. Is there some common trends that you're seeing right now?
Well, it's all wrapped up in the fact that they are so stinking busy. They're just so busy. They don't have time to go figure it all out themselves, right? As
Right.
women in particular, we think we should know how to do all of it. And I
Hey,
remember
that's not just a woman's thing. That's
no,
a
but
men's
but
thing. I
in
mean, come on.
particular, there's a lot of pressure from the home and from the kids and from everyone to be on top of everything at the house, the birthday parties, the parents' gifts, all those things. Plus,
Right.
they're running their global team, right? So there's just not enough space or time for them to figure it out on their own. So, coming to someone like me that says, look, I'm going to work with you one on one. I'm going to put together a plan. I'm going to give you advice on what to do. Here's the framework. We'll customize it for what you need. You go do that.
Right.
Then we adjust as needed. That is like, I
Right.
don't have to figure it out. I'm so used to being the decision maker. They need a safe space that they can surrender a little bit that decision making and
Right.
just go into a program and framework that they trust and they can
Right.
just follow. It's like when I first started to try and lose weight. I was trying all the things I thought I should do. I'm doing, frozen lean cuisine dinners, right? Because that's what we should do. And I remember standing in the aisle, Leo, of GNC, right? Just staring at this
Right.
wall of supplements and protein powders going,
Right.
I have no idea. And if I pick this one thing, does it go with this thing or not? And it was terrible. And that was
Yeah.
part of my evolution to educating myself and going to get myself certified, right? So that I could then take all that time and effort and put it to use for somebody else.
Yep.
Make your transition easier.
Yeah, it's interesting because, our healthcare system, those that you would trust in giving you what you should be looking at doing for your own well-being, our primary physicians aren't trained necessarily in that. They don't get to spend the time with you. There's really, where else do you go to get that? In today's world, I know part of my background in the wellness world with salt therapy and a lot of other modalities, there's so much stuff going on right now. You've got a lot of breakthroughs with innovation and technology between red light, cryo, sauna, supplements, intermittent fasting,
Love it all.
keto, this. How do you sort through all that, right? First, you want to know what works versus what doesn't work. You really want to understand. But how do you go about developing and understanding so much out there right now, especially when there's so much talk about longevity, aging, biohacking, these concepts? I can see where people can get, deer in the headlights, what to do. So how are you staying on top of it all?
I try a lot of it myself.
Right.
And in fact, I'm a huge fan of red light therapy and infrared sauna. These amazing places, like I go to a place here in Atlanta, Restore Hyper Wellness, right? They have it all. They have the IVs, they have the injectables, all that sort of stuff. So I like to try all that stuff myself. I am
Yep.
also involved in a fantastic community of other integrative health practitioners and as part of my business, we do functional labs and all the good things. So that helps me stay on top of things. I'm actually looking at an additional certification in the kind of biohacking longevity field because you're right, there's so much emerging science, right? So my mentor, my teacher, Dr. Stephen Cabral, he's now offering a certification in that. So something I'm looking into. But in terms of my clients, and what I'm doing with them today, honestly, it's about the foundations. Because when you whether you do a functional lab on your hormones or not, right? The starting thing that I do the first 30 days with any woman in my program is exactly the same, right? Because you can't get past the fact that you need to be sleeping. You need to be eating well. And a lot of people just don't even know what that looks like, don't even remember anymore or are unsure because of all the confusion. What really should I be eating? Carnivore, paleo, keto, blah, all the things. So I work with them with those fundamentals. once we get those fundamentals in place, once they get comfortable with them, once they're on a good routine, depending on what their goals are and what their progress is, then yes, I can introduce alternate things if they need them. But I got to tell you,
Right.
most of the women on my program, when they get through the first 90 days, the one thing that they want to learn how to do more is they want to learn how to be better cooks. They want to learn how to meal plan better. So like my program is called Fatigue to Fabulous. And then if they want to, they can roll off into another program that's called Staying Fabulous, right? How do I stay fabulous? How do I move beyond?
Right.
So being custom. So I think unfortunately, when you're looking at heart disease and stroke and type 2 diabetes,
Yep.
those things, it's based on the fundamentals.
Yep.
All the biohacking in the world, all the red light therapy in the world won't make a bit of difference if you're eating like crap and you're
Yep.
not managing your stress. So
Yep.
you got to get those right
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. We say too, your respiratory wellness, if you're not breathing well, if you, quality of life, if you, the quality of the air that we breathe indoors and outdoors really impacts us. And we don't think about it until something does go wrong.
Right.
I had cancer 6 years ago, and that kind of was a wake-up call. I'm a survivor. That got handled. But as you are trying to age fabulously, what does that look like, right, in terms of taking care of yourself? So do you do assessments up front? What kind of tools do you use? Is it just conversational? Are you doing lab work? Are you doing any work like that or recommending that?
We can
Yeah.
do labs. The labs are optional. Some people opt for them, some people don't.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like every woman between ages 25 and 28 should get a full set of functional labs done, because that's when your hormones are really optimal, so that you can have that as a baseline for as you go forward. I never had that done. I didn't
Right.
know about
What
functional
do you
medicine.
mean by functional? Tell me what you mean by a functional panel.
So more of the naturopath side. So instead of conventional medicine, which
Right.
I am still a huge fan of, if I get, in a car accident and I break my leg, I want to be taken to the emergency room, right? However, I think that people should also you should have your regular medical doctor, you should have your MD, but you should have access to functional health, because like you were mentioning earlier about doctors, unless a doctor searches it out specifically, they are not trained on nutrition.
Right.
Unless an OBGYN specifically searches it out, they're not trained on hormones. Think about that for a second.
Right.
Two things that are fundamental to our basic building blocks of overall fundamental health and our main two primary healthcare, if you even have a functional practitioner,
Right.
they're not, on the conventional side, they're just not addressing it. Stress, which causes all these things, you can go into your MD and many of them won't even ask you what's been going on in your life,
Yep.
right? Has there anything significant happened in the last 12 to 24 months?
Right.
So these things are things that I get into and I have conversations. Because when you're talking about women who are struggling with hormonal changes, or they're struggling with weight gain in many cases is a symptom. And it's not just a symptom of not exercising and sitting on the couch and eating Netflix, right?
Right.
Weight gain is a symptom that something in your body is out of balance at a fundamental level. So we have to go down and we have to look at the drivers of root cause health to see if we can fix it, versus potentially running to a prescription which deals with symptoms but which does not address root causes.
Right.
That's the difference really between a functional perspective and a conventional perspective.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. My father was a physician. He was a DO, not an MD. And
What's
the
a D?
state,
I'm sorry, I don't even know what.
a DO is a medical doctor, 4-year degree and everything, but most doctors are either an MD or a DO. And the DO stands for Doctor of Osteopathy, osteopathic physician. And back in the day, the very first physicians back in the 1800s had a lot of the functional training.
They
What
did.
to eat, do all these things. And then as the population grew, the universities wanted to streamline the curriculum so that they could get more doctors into the communities. So they broke tradition, and there was the 4-year medical degree and the 4-year medical degree, but with a DO, where they were more holistic, where they took into the considerations of not just diagnosing and prescribing, but Are you exercising?
Yes.
Are you doing? What are you eating? And so my father was a DO, and the stigma back then was, oh, they were just a glorified chiropractor, which wasn't the case.
No.
They do surgeries, they do everything, and they are a different a philosophy. But at the end of the day, the same thing. My primary is a DO. But to your point, it's our system, and people need to take responsibility for their own health, self-care. Being proactive. We're mostly in a reactive society, as you just mentioned, where we wait until something happens.
Exactly.
Let me shift. So,
Sure.
how are you seeing? A lot of focus has been not just on menopause, but mental wellness for women, especially in the workforce. How are you? What are you seeing in that? I know that's affecting sleep for most people, which is so crucial. Rest, which is different than sleep. Mindfulness, you're starting to see a lot more. How are you? How does that come into play?
Well, it's funny. A lot of things. One of the questions I always ask women is, were they on hormonal birth control, like the pill? Because the incidence rate of mental health issues for people who are on or with the pill are much higher. When you
Really?
look at incidences of depression and suicide, it's
Interesting.
extreme. Yes. Dr. Jolene Brighton has got a great book called Beyond the Pill, and she's got a lot of great research that was in that piece. So I do look at where they are with their hormones, because when your hormones are off, right? If you're not, you're everything is yin and yang in the body, that directly impacts your mood. So I think, again, not to go back to it, but you always have to start at the beginning.
Right.
If you are nutrient depleted, if you are overly stressed, if you are not sleeping, if you're not exercising, then the obvious question is okay, what sort of focus have you been putting on these areas of your life? And in most cases, it really comes down to two different types of answers. One is the answer of, well, I haven't done anything at all, and I just found you, and I want you to help me get on the right path. Great. You're like a clean slate, right? We can go again. Then the other woman is like, look, I have tried, keto. I have tried exercising my hiney up in the gym. I've tried all these things and nothing's working. So then for those women, it's okay. We need to take a look back, and we need to have some conversations about the central nervous system. We need to have a conversation about how your primary operating mode is fight or flight, right? Instead of rest and relax. So your sympathetic nervous system is out of control, which is driving issues with your blood sugar, which is, decreasing your thyroid effectiveness, which is upsetting your hormonal balance. So then it's big conversations about, okay, again, key supplements that can help, whether it's plant adaptogens to help manage that mental and physical stress, activated B vitamins. Are we doing timeouts for mindfulness? What type of journaling are we doing? What type of meditation, even just walking meditations, whatnot. Those are the areas that we go into, because those things work. They are incredibly effective. And it's just when people hear those things, they think, well, wow, that's so simple, right? So what's simple to do is also simple not to do. And so they dismiss it because they think it's got to be this big, complicated answer, when I'm like, no, it's really not. And so then they try it for a few weeks, and then they come back and I ask them, how are you feeling? Wow, I'm sleeping at least an hour and a half more a night. Or my Aura Ring says my sleep metrics are amazing.
That's right.
So
it's weird. Well, it is interesting. I think, data is becoming more important to us, right? I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I look at what my Aura Ring tells me. How accurate it is, I'm not going to get into, but it's a benchmark for me. And sometimes I wonder, well, if I didn't look, if I had good or fair or optimal, does that impact the rest of my day psychologically, right?
Yes, it absolutely does. I was having this conversation with some of my girlfriends this past weekend, and she's like, I went through this phase where if my Aura Ring said my metrics weren't right, but I was feeling good, it would throw me off.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of like, if I don't know, what would it be like, right?
Right. So I tell them, only look when you're not feeling good, is what I told her.
But we're getting to a society where we're getting good data. We're able to get feedback. We need to understand how we work. And, as I'm now aging, I'm starting to notice, oh, I may need to do this, and I never done that before. I have a, stenosis in the neuropathy in with a nerve. I may need to do things differently. And it's unfortunate that we have to wait for something to happen for us to do a wake-up call, and we shouldn't have to. And particularly in our society, in America, it does seem that we're more lazy than other cultures to really take our own self-care to the next level. But I see that pendulum shifting. And I think you're right. The more conversations that are happening, I know like with the people that I network around, wellness is on top of mind all the time, and, whether it's work-life balance, it is that the relationship balance. I know a lot of career women that they just focus on their career and their marriage or their home life then suffers. Or a lot of people live life where, to a certain degree, I'll have my career, then I'll do this, then I'll enjoy life. And we have compartmentalized it. But if we're going to be living to 120 soon, then maybe we have to reshift the paradigms that it's not, I'll do this now and I'll do that later. How do you incorporate that now? I'm sure when you were an executive, you would have loved to have had this available to yourself back then,
Yeah, the information is much more available now than it was even 10 years ago. That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. And I think there is a much broader realization that if you do want to be successful in your career or successful at business and also lead people effectively, be seen as a leader, right? What does it, I asked, I have a client who switched law firms in New York, and she was going to lead a big team. And we had a conversation and say, because of the culture in law firms, right? Talk about overwork and overstress, right? So
Right.
what would it mean to your new team to see you prioritizing taking care of yourself? What kind of a leader would you be perceived to be? You come in, you are fit, you are relaxed, you're eating lunch, you're walking at your desk,
Yep.
you are prioritizing conversations. I said, how do you think that would impact the people who are looking to you? And it was this big, realization moment,
You're
right?
right on. You're right on. I have some friends that uh, do this work about that particular topic. And it is amazing. It's very hard for somebody that is a leader. If they're not well, what does that signify?
Exactly.
And I think being well, living well, leading well is all wrapped up part of it. And, it's an interesting thing. I know that a lot of my listeners are going to really gravitate towards this because people are in that mind frame right now. As particularly, I know you do a lot of work with women over 40, and then you got over 50, over 60, over 70, right? It's an interesting time frame. We're grandparents now, and it does alter your perspective and how you want to live. And how do we capture that when we're younger? If I looked at my 29-year-old self right now and be able to coach myself, maybe I have no regrets, but I wonder.
You are invincible at 29. Come
Yeah,
on.
exactly. But that's the same thing, and I appreciate your enthusiasm and your passion around this, and I'm sure you get into a lot more depth conversations with women that you could really dive deeper into that I can't relate to, and likewise, while I love that there's all this women health, men need the same thing, by the way.
Oh, I am well aware of that. I actually have a client who is a guy. He was CEO of one firm, he's president of another, and he contacted me right before his transition. He said on LinkedIn, "Hey Jennifer, I know you work with women, but I really love what you're saying, and I'd like
Yep.
to talk about working together. And he's crushing it. He's doing so amazing. I mean, and it is so different in terms of, style and personality.
Sure.
But again, because my program ultimately is about fundamentals, there's just a less of a, obviously we talk a lot less about the estrogen and progesterone ratios,
Right.
but talking
Right.
about all the other fundamental boulders are the same. And he has completely changing how he's eating.
Right.
After his first 2 months, he had lost 40 pounds. He's doing a 21-day functional
Okay.
medicine detox right
Well-
now, and he's doing great.
Well, there would be two things I would follow up with you on that one. One, I'd be curious. The second, maybe you need to do a program for men to know how to be around their woman,
True.
How
to support them through these changes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because that's I think a challenge, as you get older and menopause and the mood swings sometimes and the hot flashes and all of that, you kind of wonder, but that will be another topic. But
I think that sounds like an excellent topic for a LinkedIn Live.
yeah, there you go. Well, I appreciate you joining the program. I know that a lot of people are going to be curious to be able to get some of your information tagged along with this episode, and great discussion on women being and living well. Appreciate
Thank
it, Jen.
you so much. I really appreciate it. And you take care.
All right, you too. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Distinctly Well. For all the show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, head over to distinctlywell.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show to never miss an episode, and check out the video version of each episode over on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, live distinctly, live well.